Meanwhile, the protagonist went after the captain who had helped him with the plan to take the mother and baby to another country, who was recently found lifeless, and discovered what really happened. In the next scene, we move to Young Soon, and she is saying goodbye to Andrea, who is leaving due to the end of his exchange program, but is immensely grateful to the lady for accepting him as a helper on her farm. Later, after a small discussion with her friends, which was actually more of a misunderstanding, the rest of the village that didn't know about Young Soon's illness became aware of the matter. One of her neighbors, who was in the middle of the confusion, deeply regretted having spoken offensively. After all, she had always felt inferior to Young Soon because Sam-sik, who is her son, had become a questionable person, totally unlike Kang-ho. Moving on to Woo Byok's two men, who lived in the village for some time, we see a scene where their boss gives a direct order for the pair to eliminate the protagonist once and for all. Returning to Mi-ju and Sam-sik, it was the woman who managed to enter Ha-young's room. At first, it was difficult to convince the former prosecutor's daughter to leave with the pair and give a statement against her father, but thanks to Mi-ju not being a person who gives up easily, she made it clear that if anything happened to the protagonist, Mi-ju would go after Ha-young and end her life. Ha-young still feels bad about what she did to Kang-ho and is angry with her father. The woman agreed to embark on this plan, so in the next scenes, we see the three of them fleeing the hospital. Even Kang-ho encountered them along the way, surprising Sam-sik and Ha-young to see that he had returned to who he was. However, now the protagonist feels even more pressured. He has to make his plan work to bring down Tae-soo and Woo Byok. After all, Mi-ju is involved in the middle of this mess, and Kang-ho couldn't bear to lose another person he loves. Well, using his criminal side for good, Sam-sik knows of a place where they can stay safe until Tae-soo and Woo Byok are arrested, which is the building where those men he owes live, where illegal games also take place. Taking advantage of the fact that Kang-ho has recovered his memory, Sam-sik says that the boss of the place and his men will not be arrested thanks to him being friends with a prosecutor, but in exchange, they must provide shelter for them to conduct a fake investigation to keep the media away. Surprisingly, this excuse was well received, and even Sam-sik's debt was forgiven. Now with the girls settled in a room, Kang-ho had a private conversation with Ha-young, and despite being the one who was most hurt in this story, the man apologized to her for using her to get to Tae-soo. Also at this moment, Ha-young's doubts about ever being loved by the protagonist were put to rest, as he told her that Mi-ju had never left his heart and that one of the most difficult things the protagonist had to do was leave her. Shortly after, we see that before Kang-ho went after more evidence, Mi-ju overheard the end of the conversation and bid him farewell with a kiss, then asked him to be careful, as she would be waiting for him to return. Meanwhile in the village, Woo Byok's men returned to the place to finish off the protagonist, but upon seeing that they were being followed, the pair realized that they would probably be discarded right after completing the job. So, they first fought their colleagues and then fled. The next day, Kang-ho went to meet Tae-soo at an event where the presidential candidate was and caught him by surprise. But the time hadn't yet come for the protagonist to announce Tae-soo's arrest. In fact, the protagonist went to him to suggest a deal. If Tae-soo agrees to testify against Woo Byok, Kang-ho will clear him of the upcoming accusations, which he will obviously face, and will reduce the penalties that the candidate will receive. The protagonist also promises to return Tae-soo's daughter and emphasizes that he is only proposing this deal because he wants the man who ended his father's life and tried to do the same to his mother behind bars. In the next scene, we move to Woo Byok talking to one of the men he had sent to finish off Kang-ho, and seeing him alive surprised the gentleman. After all, right after his man finished the job, others would end him. However, during the conversation, when Woo Byok's former employee was having his life threatened, Kang-ho appeared with police officers to arrest him for attempting to take someone's life. At this moment, we discover that this ambush was planned by the protagonist along with Woo Byok's former employee. Now, the investigations to bring down Woo Byok have officially begun through the justice system. Kang-ho even gave an interview to the press, which surprised the village people who didn't know he was well again when they saw him. The next day, everyone prepares to go to the courthouse to watch our dear Kang Ho acting again in his profession, and of course, his mother was emotional. After all, she had asked so much for her little boy to return to his life before. Focusing on the trial, several things happened at this exciting moment. One of the most important things is that Young Soon, who was already very ill, nearly fainted while her son was speaking, but as the lady knew this could hinder him from giving his best performance, she mustered all her strength to remain firm and strong in her seat. Speaking a bit more about the trial itself, Kang Ho first exposed Woo Byok's bad side, which was getting rid of anyone who ever presented a threat, and truly this part cannot be denied. After all, they are lifeless. Kang Ho also brought to the case another open case, that of the mother and baby who was found floating in the sea and who had worked for Woo Byok in the past. Continuing, the protagonist interconnected all the cases by having Woo Byok's former employee speak about the order he had received to end the lives of some people, whom we saw at the beginning of the first episodes that Kang Ho had ordered to be arrested, and also about Woo Byok giving the order to end the protagonist's life. To support his accusation, Kang Ho called Tae-soo to testify, and as agreed, the presidential candidate confirmed all the wrong things that Woo Byok does and did in his time as a prosecutor, which he even went so far as to cover up. However, Tae-soo didn't expect that Kang Ho would use Hayoung anyway, and soon after, he was forced to watch his daughter testify and talk about the accident in which she caused Kang Ho's temporary memory loss. The woman also added that one of the reasons her father wanted the protagonist dead was because he had discovered about the son Tae-soo had outside of marriage. Hayoung added one more fact, which was about Tae-soo conspiring with Woo Byok 35 years ago to take the life of Kang Ho's father. Putting this great chaos together, the four were interconnected, and the only way to thoroughly examine this situation would be to do a DNA test on the child, who lost his mother to Tae-soo's men when she jumped from the boat in an attempt to survive somehow. The boy is alive, and the captain who was going to help the mother and son leave the country took care of him all this time, and now, after the test results came out, Tae-soo was arrested for numerous crimes, along with Woo Byok. As for Hayoung, she received a slightly shorter sentence. After all, the woman confessed to having attempted to take her fiancé's life at the time, but in any case, living away from her father is much better. In the following days, Young Soon's birthday party took place, and there the woman thanked her friends for always helping her, and her son for fighting for justice until the end. Young Soon also gave her blessing to the couple Kang Ho and Mi Ju, giving them the pair of wedding rings she had received from the protagonist's father years ago. That same night, Kang Ho decided he would sleep next to his mother every day until it was time for him to leave home and live his married life with Mi Ju. However, while singing Young Soon to sleep, unfortunately, Kang Ho began to notice that his mother was slowly slipping away, and at the end of the song came the end of our beloved Young Soon's life. Although she didn't have as long a life as expected, Young Soon lived hers intensely, and at its end, the lady passed away very happy, fulfilled that her son was well and content. So at her funeral, it couldn't be just sadness, and the song she always sang, which translates to, "I am very happy," was sung by all her friends, neighbors, and son who knew it was the best tribute to represent her. In the next scene, we fly a bit forward in time and see that Sam-sik has finally overcome his love for Mi Ju. Now he visits Hayoung in jail and brings gifts to win her over. As for the pair who worked for Woo Byok, they really did become farmers. After all, they had already bought some land from Sam-sik's parents and now truly live in the village. Meanwhile, Kang Ho released those people from the beginning of the season whom he had imprisoned, even knowing they were innocent. The protagonist had to keep them in prison so that neither Tae-soo nor Woo Byok would end them. And even though they were imprisoned for 2 years, they were all extremely grateful when they were released. As for our beloved Mi Ju and the twins, they are happier than ever with Father Kang Ho present in their lives, and as the little girl had predicted when she was in love with the protagonist, now the four of them take care of the happy farm. Young Soon left a letter for her son, apologizing for all the times she erred as a mother, even though she was trying to do right, and one thing she said, which my mother always told me too, is that it's their first time playing this role, just as it's our first time living this life, so it's common to have mistakes and successes, but we should always apologize for them and live in the best way. Of course, our protagonist was moved, however from this reading he had a great idea and proposed to Mi Ju, just as his father had done years ago, using a little pig to carry the rings. What did you think of this season? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me. See you next time.